In most cases, we face this problem of starting and stopping and starting and stopping all the time. After a few weeks, you start to think to yourself, did I just fall into the trap of marketing again? Am I consuming books as products? Or am I actually interested to get this book so that this book would fade into my background like an old camera lens? Hello and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Wednesday. Super excited to spend some time together, so make sure you have a coffee in your hand or a tea. I have water because it is currently 9 p.m. and I prefer to do most of my recording at night because there's no traffic outside. All the dogs are in their dog houses sleeping, so no barking dogs either. But anyway, today we're going to make the video that I've been wanting to make for the longest time. And over time, I really feel like this is how I approach content. The stuff that I'm talking about now is probably the stuff that I started thinking about 2 to 3 years ago. And now do I feel like I actually have some sort of a grasp on a situation, and it's really difficult to distill all of that down into like a 5 to 10 minute video that's all chopped up with a jump cut editing. I just feel like it's not as pleasant to explain something as intricate or as multifaceted as this topic that we're going to tackle today. So, what is the topic? The topic is: have you ever noticed that whenever you start a book, and whenever you start to read a book, and you say to yourself, "Okay, this is it. I'm going to read this book cover to cover." You know, someone recommended this book to me. I'm reading this book for a book club. There's no margin for quitting, right? And then you go buy the book, you buy the nicest edition of the book, and then you kind of sit there, you get all excited, you go to a cafe, you read for a little bit, you get home, you light a candle, you make yourself a cup of tea, and you read a little bit. But then what happens is that after maybe a few days, or maybe even a few hours, or maybe even after a few weeks, you start to lose that initial momentum that you once had. So when you hopped into the bookshop, you're one person, but a few weeks later, you're a completely different person. And you think to yourself, God damn it, I've lost my motivation to read this book. This book doesn't seem as exciting as it used to be to me right now. And you think to yourself, man, do I still really want to read this book? And then actually, when you're going through the book, it's more like you're drudging through the drudgery instead of having that excited energy to get through the book, right? So inevitably, what happens is that you quit. You think to yourself, well, better find something more interesting, better find something that I actually would love to finish cover to cover, better find something that I would absolutely love every page of. And then what happens? You pick up the next book, and then you start doing this thing again. You hop into a bookstore, one person, you hop out as a completely different person. A few weeks later, you get bored again. What happens is that after a few months of doing this, you would have accumulated maybe a dozen unfinished books. You stop halfway through in maybe 20 to 30 books, and you just see all these books piling up on your shelves. You think to yourself, what is wrong with me? I can never finish a book. That is a hump that I feel like a lot of readers, even experienced readers, I still go through this problem every single day. And I would like to address this problem in this video, and I would like to give my take on this problem because it exists in the intersection between like consumerism and the dopamine culture that we're in, and then how like book as a medium, reading a book as an activity. Like, it is so unique in the 21st century, and most of us, we haven't been taught how to approach this form factor, right? You might have read a novel or two in high school, but like these things weren't really explicitly taught. People just kind of assume that you can do it. A lot of like booktube people, myself included, would just kind of assume that, you pick up a book, you should have the attention span and everything to finish the book cover to cover. But in most cases, we face this problem of starting and stopping all the time. So why don't we put aside our pride and just admit to yourself, we have this problem. This is kind of a problem that we start piling up half-read books. As much as I like to say, as I have in the past, it's like read what you're interested in. I started to feel like that might not apply to this case right here, because there are many instances where a book is supposed to get kind of tough halfway through, right? But if you give up, you're kind of missing out on like the 80% of the book. You're kind of missing out the juice that's maybe located near the end of the book. So we keep on sacrificing, the points where the book could get good for this kind of initial gratification hit. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And grab your popcorn and let's get into it. So I actually want to start by talking about something completely different, which is I promise, it's gonna link back to this problem of starting and stopping books. So we're gonna start from my recent obsession with camera gear. Yes, actually, here's the funny joke. Every YouTuber at some point, they got into YouTube not because they just want to make YouTube videos or they just want to, like, for me, for example, I didn't get on YouTube just because I love talking about reading, right? I was actually really obsessed with cinematography, photography, and above all, camera gear. So I went on this whole like rampage. I sold a bunch of my old lenses and then got a bunch of new lenses. And then I try to experiment, try to recapture some of that like childlike wonder, right? And throughout this whole process of like selling the old stuff that no longer works and acquiring new stuff, throughout this process, I started to realize that the stuff that I actually do use on a daily basis, for example, the camera that's filming this video right now, it's the Fujifilm X-T4. Got this way back in 2019 from this like really dodgy looking discount like Fujifilm camera website. Didn't have much to work with at the time, but this camera has lasted me like, it's like 2019, it's 2025 now, like over 6 years. It's coming up to 7, so it's quite a solid piece of gear. And of course, all the other things like my editing software and all the other stuff that makes this YouTube channel possible. I started to realize that the stuff that you actually use and the stuff that actually works, they tend to fade into the background. It's not like this new exciting thing. For example, now I do a little photography with a Fuji XM5, which is like one of these topical cameras. Everyone wants one of these. So now I'm kind of enjoying myself, kind of taking photographs here and there. It's all very new and exciting. But the stuff that has actually gotten me to this point in my career, they were very silent servants in the background. They were just kind of the stuff that they always work. They're reliable, right? And the same thing happens with with a computer. So for the first few days, maybe after you get yourself a new laptop, you're very excited. You're like, I get to work with this thing. Every day I get to carry this thing to a coffee shop. I get to sit down to look really cool with it when I'm at the coffee shop. But then a few months in, if the laptop is really good, and if you can get everything you want to get done on there, the laptop kind of fades into the background. It disappears. It just allows you to do the thing that you want it to do. And once you're accustomed to that level, once the novelty kind of wears off, it becomes a part of your life. It whispers in the background. It ensures that all your life runs very smoothly. It ensures that nothing goes out of whack. It ensures that it supplies you with the right amount of battery energy so you can get your work done. And same with like a slew of different things. For example, sometimes I have this a lot with working out. When I first started kind of working out consistently at the gym, it's like this exciting thing. You start playing, you start getting that main character thing going on every time you're on your way to the gym. You think to yourself, yes, I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have a lot more energy throughout the day. All that is true. But now after like about, almost 2 years of just consistently going there, working out 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 times a week, it just becomes like a part of my life that becomes unconscious. It disappears. It works and it subtly but incrementally improves your life. And reading here belongs to that category of stuff. It's the old camera lens that never fails. It's the old notebook that you turn to all the time for inspiration. And it is that workout routine that you completely take for granted that probably added 10 extra years to your life. It is in that category. Whereas something like something exciting, like a silly photography camera, or a new thing that just got released, or like the latest iPhone. Your old one probably works fine, but you might just want the new one. Or anything that gives you that first initial dopamine hit, they actually might not be the thing that you want to invest much of your time and energy into. Especially when it comes down to books, because now we are getting flooded with recommendations and new releases left, right, and center. If you heading to any bookshop in your local city, if you're heading to any bookshop, if you're heading to any kind of like chain bookstores like Barnes and Noble, there's usually like a pyramid full of like the stuff that like staff recommends, right? Or staff recommend you to read this, 10 books that you need to read before you die. And then like those books, they typically have some sort of novelty factor about them. It's either like it's an older book, but now our discourse have aligned with this book, so that really propels you to buy it. Or it's a new release from this hotshot author, and that really propels you to buy that. So if you really think about it, if we're very brutally honest, that is not reading. That is consuming books as products. And that definitely is going to give you some sort of dopamine hit. You get that book in the bag, you think to yourself, I'm so like excited to get into this stuff. But then after a few weeks it starts to wear off. After a few weeks you start to think to yourself, did I just fall into the trap of marketing again? Did I actually think this purchase through? Or did I actually think through this kind of like book buying business? Am I consuming books as products just to get that first few days of high of reading this book for the first time? Or am I actually interested to get this book so that this book would fade into my background like an old camera lens, like an old water bottle that just happens to work because hydration is super important, or like an old, like an old power tool that whenever something breaks down, you turn to it all the time, and it starts to get some sort of character, right? And a book, the more you read it, the closer you get towards the end. It's kind of like using an old piece of kit. It starts to get scratch marks on them. It starts to have more character because you are able to relate. You're able to live with this book for like a month or for a few weeks because you have that sustained engagement with it. And the mode of engaging with it is not actually supposed to be that exciting. It's supposed to fade into the background. So you dip in and out of this book so that gradually reading this book is slowly going to seep into your life. A really good example is I recently started reading. I have the copy somewhere, like it's in my bag. I can't really get off because the headphone's going to disconnect. I recently bought a copy of The Savage Detectives, sort of like my gateway drug into Latin American literature, and I got really excited. And I started reading it, for like a week straight, and I couldn't get my head out of it. It's such a fascinating kind of weird, twisted story. Poetry's laced in there, weird sex stories are laced in there, and it's just a super well-written book. But then after a week of reading that book from this really excited and engaged state, I stopped reading it for a few days. And I clocked that, right? I started clocking it, and I'm like, okay, given that a week ago you really loved reading this book, what the fuck happened? Why are you putting it down? And then I started to notice, yep, there he goes again. Like here's my brain trying to find another thing, to get another hit of like getting that high from buying a book and reading the first 50 pages really excitedly. Right? Here's my brain looking for novelty again. But it is during those instances where you actually have to betray your instincts, where you have to say to yourself, okay, now I need to view this book in front of me from a completely different mindset. Instead of viewing it as something that's going to give me like the surplus pleasure, I sit down and the world disappears, it's probably going to be something like you dip in and out 20 pages a day. It's probably just going to be a little bit of reading that you get done on a 10-minute train ride. It's probably just going to be like that old camera lens or old power tool in your shed. Whenever you need to dip in and out, you use it and you put it aside. It becomes a part of your life. It disappears. It's like a trustworthy laptop. You turn to it to get work done, but then you walk away from it as soon as that work is done. And then this is how you get that sustained engagement with the book. That's not supposed to be that exciting, and it's not supposed to be like a all or nothing. You don't have to sit down and read for 3 hours, because with every book, at some point, you're going to reach this point, especially if you're tackling a mammoth that's over 1,000 pages long. You'd have to switch your mindset from, I'm really excited to read this, to something like, I'm just going to sit down. I know how much I have to read on a daily to finish this book before the end of the year, and you simply do it. You treat it as something that has already faded into your life. It's in the background. It's over there. It's subtly but slowly coloring your world. It's supposed to, like a really good workout routine that you no longer think about, subtly strengthen your mind. And it's not supposed to be that exciting, at least not every single day. But once in a while, throughout that whole process, you might have a few days where you're like, oh my God, if I quit this book like maybe 30 pages ago, I would have missed out on all this stuff here. This is amazing. I can't believe I even entertained a thought of quitting this book. You're going to have a lot of those as you're going through all your TBR lists, as you're going through all your stuff. And as you're doing this, resist the temptation to read more recommendation lists. Resist the temptation to like maybe buy another book just because you crave that novelty again. Because here's the thing, books are not supposed to be consumed. They're supposed to be savored. Especially a book that you kind of that you really like the look of, especially a book that you've invested sufficient amount of time and energy into already. It's not going anywhere. It's simply going to be in the background. It's not going to go anywhere. And they're supposed to be savored. And a mindset that you have to approach it with should not be that consumer mindset where you want the latest thing or you want a different copy of the same thing. But it's supposed to fading to the background like a trustworthy old camera lens where it's supposed to color your world, alter your perception, and add just a little bit of fun and joy and fascination and curiosity into your life. And that is what I think, very briefly, how to alter your mindset when you're facing one of those instances where you get into a book and you quit halfway through. If you want to break that cycle, somewhere down the line, you have to make that switch in your brain. You have to think, oh my God, I'm actually treating books as consumer objects. I'm not actually treating books with the dignity that they deserve. And this doesn't mean that you now have to read every book cover to cover. There are instances where some books are simply not for you. You got seduced by the cover, you got seduced by the blurb, whatever, right? And you're going to know very quickly because you're going to know that within the first 50 pages. But in this case, we're talking about those books where you like the first 50 pages, yet you still struggle to finish it. That's what it demands. Switch your mindset. And that's all I have for this week's episode. And then again, this segment is called Coffee Wednesday. So every Wednesday, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about one of the topics just like this one, something practical, something interesting, something that you can apply throughout the week. And of course, if you want more of this stuff, I send out a newsletter every Saturday morning for you to read over your coffee over at amugofinsights.org. That is amugofinsights.org. So you can sign up for free and I'll send you one of these nuggets of food for thought every single week. And that's the end of today's video. Robin Walden here. Hope you guys are having an amazing morning, an amazing evening, wherever you are in the world. Take care. I'll see you next time, and goodbye.